Sterling is the manager of strategic partnerships at Tile. He leads all of Tile's strategic partnerships, including collaborations with design agencies, integrations with companies like Adobe, and reselling partnerships with companies like Seismic. He is focused on generating new revenue, retaining customers through partner channels, and serving as a subject matter expert on how Tile functions within these partnerships. Under his leadership, Tile's partnerships contributed to more than half of the company's revenue. Please join me in welcoming Utah State graduate Sterling Frandsen.
Cool, thank you. It's exciting to be here, and I'm hoping that, today what I really want to focus on is stuff that I wish I was taught or told when I was back in school. I graduated in 2020, so during the pandemic, all that fun stuff. This is what I wish I would have known as I was trying to go and search out what I was going to do in sales, roles in sales, where I should be working, things of that nature. We're going to focus on SaaS. That's what I've worked in, so software as a service, so companies that sell software. But I want to open this up for a little bit, some questions first to kind of get things moving, because I know we've already sat through one session, and so I'm hoping this will help. So I'm curious if any of you have considered a career in sales. If you have, go ahead and just raise your hand. Okay, more than I was expecting. Very good. What appeals to you about it? Like, why do you want to be in sales? Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's something nice about being able to connect with someone and be face-to-face with someone and help them just overall with the product that they need help with, but just...
Yeah, spot
on. My name is Ryan. I've been in sales for 6-7 years, most recently a key account director at a SaaS cyber startup.
Cool.
What I love about it is truly that you get to learn and address new problems, not symptoms, but problems, true actual business case scenarios that affect a lot of people in a lot of different knock-on organizations. There's very few places where you get to come in, put on a hat that's different every single day to just muck around with data and process and people.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate, because you have some expertise and experience, so you've articulated it in a way that I think people, when they're in sales, understand versus what the perception of sales maybe from an outside world. One thing I want to talk a little bit more, another kind of question is, what is your current perception of sales and what makes you feel that way? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Javis. I am a marketing and information systems major here at the U. I think for me, sales is something where you can create a story. Strategic storytelling is something that I've always been passionate about, and being able to create a story and value on seemingly what you probably wouldn't have think, and really help people's lives being more efficient. So I think for me, the idea of being able to tell a story from nothing and share that value towards people and different backgrounds is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think it's similar to what the gentleman in the back had mentioned as well about being able to put on different hats and things. I did want to bring up this graph just because it is interesting. I think those of us who are not in this room, but if we went and just asked some random person out on the street, at least in terms of the trustability of sales as it's perceived generally, at least we're a little more trusted than politicians, telemarketers, or journalists. But as we're looking at it as a whole, sales is probably one of the least trusted professions out there. We know that just because of used car salesmen, all those things where all they want to do is get you, take what you want. They're not there to help and support. And I'm hoping that at least through some experience that I've had in my own sales career, that it can help change that. Obviously, you're all here for a reason. But I found that some interesting, stats. And then I'm kind of curious, and this will go along with what we'll talk about later today, but what do you think a salesperson's role is in a company, and what do they do?
I think it depends on if it's pre-sales or post-sales, but what they would do is help close the deal, and then if it's post-sales, they help make sure that their product's implemented correctly and it's running the way they need to.
Yeah.
I would say 95 to 98% of your job is listening and asking follow-up questions. Your client is going to present you with symptoms of pain. They usually don't understand what the root cause is, and you need to understand their business and their problem set better than they do to fix it.
That is spot on, and that is something I wish I would have known or understood before I went into sales. My perception of sales is you are a headhunter, you are going out, you're going to go find business, you're going to get rejected, you're going to do hundreds of calls a day, and that was it. There was no other potential for other roles within the sales role. And so that, as I've gone through my experience, I've found that that is not the case. Similar to what you had mentioned back there, was there's different roles depending on, was it the beginning of the sales cycle, in the middle, at the end? Is it someone of a long-term customer, similar to the conversation we were having before?
Well, I've been in sales for a long time, and it was probably in the 10th, and been very, very successful. In about my 10th year, I was willing to admit to the public that I was a salesman. Because now I'm proud of it, but it was just like the demonstration. It was, the story of the person my sister-in-law is a prostitute, my brother sells drugs, my dad's in prison. Do I dare tell my prospective father-in-law that I'm a salesman?
That's spot on. I have heard so many, I think in the sales community sometimes, to your point, we come up with unique ways to tell people what we do. We help develop, business. We are supporting customers, whatever it may be. We don't want to go out and flat out tell them.
But in answer to your question, I think a salesman tries to find out what the customer wants and then tells about that part of his product that fits those wants, as opposed to just tell about the product.
You're right. I think that's what helps helps real sales reps kind of stand out is, are they just trying to sell a solution, or sell a product, or are they trying to the point that was given before, listen, understand, and then provide a solution that makes sense? So just kind of briefly, I just want to touch on the 3 points that I'm hoping to get through today. One is I want to talk about the different companies you can start at, anywhere from a large scale enterprise down to an early stage startup. Then I want to go in and talk about different sales roles, because I think that there's so many different sales roles that are available that I wasn't aware of until I got in, that may better align with what you want to do. And so I want to make sure you're aware of what's available so you can start to pursue those more readily. And then if we have time, I want to make sure we talk about maximizing opportunities, both in school as you are today, but also in your first job, as we listened to in the keynote. There's so much importance in that first job that you get. How do you make sure you're maximizing those opportunities to set you up for success long term? Just briefly about me, I live in Eagle Mountain now, born and raised in Utah. I went to school at Utah State University. I joined the professional sales program, which was what helped get me into more of the professional sales place. I've been married for 8 years, coming on 9 here at the end of the year. My wife, Jordan, we have 2 kids, my daughter, Kaylin, who's 4, and then a son who is 1. My wife owns her own travel agent business, so we love to travel. She's a Disney fanatic, so that's why we had to have that there. But what was interesting is I went to school, and I did not want to do sales at first. I wouldn't even want to do business. I actually wanted to go into sports medicine. But after going in and realizing that that was not for me, just in terms of the time it would take, the classes you'd have to take, I decided to go into business. I went into international business because I knew Spanish, and I was like, all right, we'll see what happens. I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. I knew I didn't want to do finance because I hate numbers and I don't understand them. So I was just hoping for something because I didn't know what to do. While I was there, I was introduced to the professional sales program. And looking back, I realized that throughout my life, even like the past 11 years, I'd been in sales in some sort of way. Whether that was door-to-door, some sales that I tried out. I did some car sales before, and I realized that there was something about the sales motion that I loved. But I absolutely hated selling to a direct consumer. Absolutely hated it. And so I was like, all right, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so that's what I'm hoping we can kind of talk through today. So when we're thinking about companies, I talked about kind of 3, and these are more specific to SaaS or software companies. This may vary, based on CPG or others, but I just want to kind of give you some highlights of what we're thinking about them. So when you're thinking about large enterprise, everyone loves them. They're well-known brands like Salesforce. Everyone knows Salesforce. They're well-known, so it's not like you're going to have to teach a prospective client who they are. They're going to have great training programs, great structured career paths. But some of the cons you're going to have, there's going to be some internal politics going on. There's going to be longer wait times to go and potentially move up. and there's less autonomy to go outside of your, we'll call it your prospective swim lanes. So things to kind of think about. Thinking about maybe like a mid-sized enterprise that marries kind of the benefits of a early stage startup, which we'll talk about, and a large enterprise, so something like a local company like Pluralsight. They're large, may have some brand recognition, but do have the ability for you to still have some autonomy to try new things. Maybe go out of your swim lane a little bit, allow you to maybe even get in before IPO. So before a company goes public, you may be able to get some shares and equity, things of that nature. So something to think about if you want a little bit of understanding of what a startup life may look like, but not having it be early stage. And then finally, early stage startup. So I work at a company called Tile, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're an early stage startup. We've only raised a Series A. We've got about 30 employees right now. I was there when we had even down to like 17, 15 employees. And so this, obviously, I think the pros for me, or for that, is there's a lot of autonomy. You're wearing a lot of hats. You're doing a lot of things. You're running and seeing how the business is being grown from the ground up. You can have, conversations with the CEO at any point. You're having full communication across the board. Obviously, though, the risk is, are they going to be around tomorrow, right? Are there going to be ups and downs in what's going on? So you've got to be able to decide which one is right for you depending on the risks. Now, I know everyone talks about things to consider. Yes, these points are very important. What kind of risk do you want to do? Do you want a desire for structure, autonomy, et cetera? These are important points, but I want 3 points that I think are really important that I didn't realize until after I'd been in certain scenarios in my career so far that helped open my eyes to realizing how I needed to pick where my career was going to go, who I wanted to work for, and so on. So the first one is who you will be working for. So with the Super Bowl coming up, I know we're here at the U. I wanted to share a story that I heard from Britton Covey. So this is paraphrased, so I may miss a few things, but we know Britton was absolutely phenomenal here at the U. He had a breakthrough career, especially in 2022. He was set to go to be drafted for 2023 season of the NFL. Even though he had a breakout career, he did not get drafted. He was an undrafted pick. And so then the Philadelphia Eagles ended up picking him up and just kind of put him on like a long shot sort of contract. In his first few games, he was considered, and the reason why he wasn't initially picked was from his size. He was like 170 pounds, 5'8", wide receiver. We know in the NFL that is a big difference. And so thinking about you here in college now, going to quote unquote the big leagues or getting your first career, that's where you're going to want to kind of think through this. And so being able to find people that are going to support you and who you will be working for is so important, especially in that first job, your second job, who you're working for. So Britton, he wanted to be a wide receiver, but realized that he needed to be a punt receiver or a punt returner to succeed or at least have a shot in the NFL. So first few games, he was doing all right. He was missing some. He wasn't doing super great, pretty slow start to what his experience was when he was at the U. And he was struggling a lot with it. And on one particular game, it was against, I believe, Tampa Bay. He had missed 1 or 2 punts, and he was kind of feeling down. Their coach, Nick, came over to him and said, hey, you know what? We picked you for a reason. You're here for a reason. We believe in you. You are the right person for these punt returns. After that, when he went back out, I think it was the second half, he was able to do a punt return, did it for 52 yards, and his coach was just ecstatic, got the whole line on the side super excited. Then it grew to be one of the top, well-known punt returners in the NFL today and even in 2023 when that happened. I want to tell that story because being able to work for someone who believes in you and being able to understand who you're working for is so important, where maybe the company maybe is not your favorite, but that manager is someone you want to work with. The people I work with today at Tile, I would do anything for my boss. No questions asked. He is by far one of my favorite people, a mentor, someone that I look up to and I trust because he's there helping support me, through my, ups and downs of business. So something I think is really important to kind of think about. 2 is the work environment. So in this example, I had the opportunity to go work for a company in Dallas. I moved away, I had my wife here, but I moved out there by myself, didn't really know anyone to kind of test out if this would be a good opportunity for me. And this, this experience, this was mine, not saying you may like this sort of environment, but when I was there, I noticed that everyone was really lone wolf. They all kind of stood off by themselves. not a lot of collaboration. I also noticed that all they wanted to do on Mondays was talk about all the parties, drugs, and alcohol they consumed over the weekend, and throughout the week only talk about where they're going next to consume that on the weekend. That's not something I do. I don't like it, and so for me, I'm like, this is not the type of environment I want to be in. Moving it to something else where I'm working now, it's collaborative. It's being able to, there's someone that I could go call up and hang out with on the weekend, no problem. That's not an issue. They're there to supporting me in what I'm trying to do, regardless if they like it or not. You know, as an example, I love electronic dance music. They do not, but they know I do, and they love to talk to me about it. You know, there's just certain things that may not align, but they are there to support. So thinking about your work environment and how you're going to be working is very, very important. And thirdly, I want to talk about coworkers. And I know I've touched on this a little bit, but thinking about who you're working with. So yes, your boss is important, but it's also important to be able to think about who you're working with. Are you going to mesh with them? Are you going to be able to work with them? Do they have your back in any sort of situation, or are you going to be questioning if they're there to help you and you're able to help them? Okay, now, after we've kind of gone through how to pick where you may want to go and work, I want to talk about the evolution of the quote-unquote sales role in SaaS. Now, what we're going to be talking about here, these roles still exist, and they are a little bit different, and I really appreciate, what you had brought up earlier about the different roles. I've realized that roles in sales have different meanings depending on what industry you're in, and so I'll be talking again about software sales and what they are. So back in the early 90s, again, I may be off by a little bit, so I apologize, but back in the early 90s, Salesforce was part of the revolution of the predictive revenue model, meaning that they were able to create subscriptions that then they could predict that revenue. If they signed a contract for 2 years, they knew that revenue was there for 2 years and so on. So to do that, they knew they needed to create certain specific sales roles. So they have the BDR, SDR, which is a business development rep, or sales development rep. Their roles are to go out and find new business. So they're out cold calling, they're sending emails, they're trying to set meetings for, in case, this AE or the account executive. Now, the difference here with the account executives, they are the ones that are going to be closing business. So if you enjoy that negotiation, going back and forth, trying to write the contracts up, getting a deal sold, that is what the account executive and BDRs do. Then a little bit later on, they realized that some of the solutions were a little complex, and they realized that they need to bring in sales engineers to come in and support. And so what sales engineers do is if you like sales, but not necessarily want to be part of the full negotiation, but you love to get into the product and demo, sales engineers are an awesome opportunity. They're going to be the ones that know the brains behind the solution. They're going to be able to go in and answer more of those technical questions and demo the experience alongside like an account executive so that that person understands, all right, that's how the solution works. They can ask the questions and so on. Then, to help make sure that revenue is moving nicely, which was brought up earlier, you're going to have solutions consultants are kind of similar to sales engineers. I mean, I know there's some differences, but focusing more on solutions and kind of looking at branching out to potentially other solutions. But I want to focus on the customer success role. So customer success, I think, are for those individuals that love the ability to create long-term relationships that will allow you to create those relationships, help them see value in what they just bought, and then helping people renew. So those are for those individuals that may not necessarily want to go out and sell right at first, but they want to maintain those relationships, have those long-term conversations. So that's something that you just kind of be aware of. And then my favorite one, mainly because that's where I'm at right now, are partnerships. So I believe this is a new revolution in terms of the way that go-to-market teams are those teams that are bringing in or bringing revenue in to companies. They are the ones that are in charge of the way that, so business, I think, is changing, especially within the software world. We're finding more and more that people don't buy just from anyone. They buy from people they trust. And so how do you do that, especially at like a smaller company? So to kind of help round out everything, and I'll come back to that point, I started my job at Adobe. I went in there as a business development rep. I was aligned to their top manufacturing accounts, so GM, Ford, Danaher, Coca-Cola, and it was exciting to be part of those really large businesses. But I realized while I was there, it was way too rigid for me. I wanted to color outside of the lines, as was stated kind of previously in the keynote. I didn't want to follow a certain swim lane and stay there. I wanted to go find a new tool to try out. I wanted to see if I could prospect in this way, and they are very rigid in terms, especially with those top accounts, do not go outside of it. So I realized that that was not a place for me. while Adobe is amazing and I would love to go back at some point, I'm not at that place. So I went and I made the transition to an early stage startup. My wife was a little concerned of why the heck would I drop something like Adobe. But I do have to admit that Adobe opened the opportunity up. I got hit up by recruiters all the time because I had the word Adobe in my role. So being aware of where you work is going to be really important. And so going into that, I moved into Tiled as what we called an inside sales rep. An inside sales rep, in that case, I was supposed to go into existing accounts and grow revenue with expansion opportunities. We then realized that, hey, our business at Tiled actually generates over half of our revenue with partners. We need you to move in that space. And so to kind of go back to why I think partnerships is really the new role for sales, especially within go-to-market, and obviously you understand very well that, is people buy from people they trust. And so Tiled's a small company. Not everyone knows who we are, but we're working with organizations like large sales enablement tools like Seismic, who have a larger network that they are able to go and resell. So for example, because of this partnership, we're within some of the largest banks in the world, JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo. I'm talking to these individuals with IBM, people that would have never touched us or never even considered us, but only because of through a partnership where we're able to go and sell. So my role is extremely fun. I love my role because I get to wear so many hats. I'm gonna be one day, and I can kind of show you a little bit of my schedule. It's busy. I can go from one call where I am talking with a prospect, with one of our partners, pitching the idea of what we do with their software, to then jumping in and onboarding a new customer, to then going in and making sure that a customer is using our software and going to renew, and going in and then training teams and things. So my role changes so much every day, but I absolutely love it. Now, to kind of close up, because I know we've got about 10 minutes or so left. Maximizing opportunities. I want to focus on the now, and then I want to focus on what to do later on. So here in school, especially with an amazing university like the U, you need to think about growing your network. I know that we had that really fun opportunity to go in and meet a couple of people, and connect on LinkedIn. The network is how you are going to grow. It's really about who you know, not necessarily always about what you know in many cases. And so being able to know the right people will get you into certain places that you would have never been able to before. So making sure you take advantage of every networking opportunity. Taking advantage of school programs. So again, I was part of the professional sales program at USU. I know here at the business school there is a professional sales program. Get involved in programs because there are businesses that are looking to hire from these organizations. That's how I got connected to Adobe. And I do agree that you don't need to be at one of the big top 10 schools. When I was at Adobe, they actually invited 7 of us out of a group of 70 globally to come to their headquarters. 7 from Utah State. I'm just saying that in terms of no one knows who Utah State is besides us here and maybe a few other people, right? And so just being able to be aware that there are so many opportunities at these schools, take advantage of them. Take advantage of going in and looking at job shadows, coffee, lunches. There are so many times that people are open to just sit down and talk to you, even these larger CEO type individuals. If you're willing to sit down and say, I want to learn and actually be intentional, they're going to be open to it. Obviously, you have internships, and then try to learn as much as you can, ask questions. Finally, I want to talk about in your first job and kind of my experience. So again, grow and expand your network. You need to go into your job and start to find out who is the top sellers. What are they doing? Get to know them, understand their processes, find a mentor, someone that you can trust. I had the opportunity to do this at Adobe. They actually had an internal mentor program, which was absolutely amazing, got me connected. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Take advantage, though, of any personal development. So a lot of companies will actually pay for personal development opportunities. I was able to use that to go in and further my sales career. I went and did a JB sales program. I didn't have to pay for it out of pocket. It was paid for by Adobe. I was able to go and meet some amazing people who I still talk to today. I was featured on one of their podcasts. Not that it matters, but it was an opportunity because I knew them, they knew what I did, had some really good conversations. And then find hidden opportunities for growth. So 2 points. One is we were selling, so at Adobe, I was selling their digital experience. So thinking about, I sold to marketers. And I was having the hardest time wrapping my head around what the heck our solutions did, because they were a ton, and why a CMO would want that. So I decided to create a video and send it to the Adobe CMO and say, I want to learn about what you do. She took time with me and said, no one internally has ever tried to sell me on sitting down and meeting with me to learn what I do. So I got 30 minutes of the CMO's time at Adobe, and I'm just a business development rep who had been there for a year, maybe, and sat down and was able to have those conversations. Another opportunity was back to that mentorship program. I was able to meet with an individual named Greg, who actually got me in touch with the individual, Ashley Welch, who wrote this book. This book is absolutely amazing. I highly recommend it in terms of it's a very easy read. But I was able to go in, talk with this individual, Ashley, who usually charges hundreds or thousands of dollars to talk to people, and she took 30 minutes of her time as I picked her brain about her book, what I'm doing, and how I can go about in sales. So going in and just having those conversations, people are willing to share their time if they feel like it's valuable and you actually mean what you are, and take advantage of those opportunities because they are going to help drive you forward. So just kind of in closing here, and then I'll want to take some questions, but I think the main thing is just as you're going through, think about where you want to work. What type of environment? If you're not sure, go find out. Go and tour places. Go to Adobe and see what that looks like. Go to Pluralsight. You're welcome to come visit what we do at Tiled. I think there's opportunities to go try that out. Go in and then start to think about, and I think what that, I'm not going to try to say that diagram that he talked about earlier today, but I think doing that and understanding now what types of roles are actually in sales and figure out what aligns with what you enjoy. Then go and job shadow those opportunities to see if this is what you like. And then just don't get in your way and be your biggest proponent. There's nothing stopping you besides yourself. Go in there, ask questions, and you'll be able to succeed. Cool. I'll take some questions.
Honestly, we started a little late, so we're okay just taking the next 4 or 5 minutes, even if we just go a couple minutes over the questions. Cool. And then you guys can always chat in between to it as well.
So I want to know what drew you to tech sales and what experience do you get in that field that you don't get in other B2B sales?
Yeah.
And also, if you don't mind throwing in a favorite EDM artist or band.
You got it. My all-time is Avicii, rest in peace. But if I had to do one now, it's Armin van Buuren. I want to see him live. The reason I went to tech sales is I've always been fascinated about tech, just with what is going on, especially nowadays, with generative AI, things like that. And so I realized that was an interesting place. Also because that was the majority, I mean Adobe. I've always wanted to work at Adobe, and I was like, that would be really interesting to be there. I think the difference between something like CPG, and obviously if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think, with tech sales, they're so forward in many times in adopting technology. I love it. I am right now the only one at my company who's looking at ChatGPT and what we're doing. They're all looking at me to run tests for things to then tell them how they can do their job better. So for me, this is so much fun to be on the forefront of things, whereas you think banking, they're so far behind, it is scary. So for me, that was what it was. I love tech. I love the kind of forward, the newest thing, and being in tech sales kind of offers that opportunity.
Did I just go right here?
Where do you see, with AI coming up, where do you see these SDR, BDR positions headed? Do you think companies are going to narrow down their teams but focus more on sales ability, or is it all just going to be generative? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think the BDR role is necessarily going away, but it's going to be trimmed down to get rid of those individuals that don't understand it. I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing is if you know and understand how to use the technology to help further those roles, you're going to be an asset. So that's where I think it's going is AI, I think, is really going to be able to help eliminate the useless work that we would usually do to allow you to focus on more of the customer building experiences and the human touch, because we still need human in the loop a lot for sales. And I think that's where it's going.
One last question? Thank you.
Perfect. Well, let's give it up for Sterling Frandsen.